Hello, RantboxTV viewers. Once again, it is Friday. I'm your host, John Clay, and here we are about to talk about various different issues that I think will probably be useful to you guys to hear off social media, outside of comment boxes, away from those who might hijack a conversation. Today, I'm basically going to be talking about a meme that was shared by a friend, Igor, who's in the room. How are you doing, Igor?
All right, how are you?
Not bad. And that meme had various comments, some of which were not in favor of the meme. Those comments were made by Matt. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So essentially, it probably would be, best for you guys to know exactly what was on the meme. It's labeled microaggressions. These were the bubbles that are in this meme surrounding a woman who is brown. She's holding a placard saying racial microaggressions, is like a cross going through it. Not crucifix style, but more like Ghostbusters, say prohibited. So there you go. So some of the things that it says are, where are you from? Where are you really from? No, where are you really, really from? Another one says, you're not like other Muslim people. Another one says, you don't act like a normal black person. Another one says, why do you sound so white? What are you? You speak English so well. What do your people think about that? You're pretty for someone so dark. Your name is too hard to pronounce. Can I call you Mary? Now, this was originally posted by UK Against Racism. Igor, why did you post this microaggressions meme?
I suppose it kind of speaks to my experience of the phenomenon of microaggressions, and I think more people should be aware of it. I mean, it's something that generally I find people are not familiar with, are not aware when it happens, and I thought it was a nice little graphic to explain what microaggressions are and just to raise awareness of the phenomenon. That's it.
Okay. Matt, you had a significant issue with the meme, if you want to make that clear now.
So actually, like I've spoken to Igor about this before, and I know he's had issues with it. I think there's potential there for a pretty interesting conversation, because I'd be quite curious, I think, to know more about the experiences that he's had with that. Because actually, I think that is the way to raise awareness of these things. And what I do have a concern with is that by kind of dropping in a word which contains the word aggression, it is pretty instantly, I think, alienating anyone who, maybe has some curiosity about this, is not sure what's going on, or how to approach people from a different country or a different ethnic origin, and what sort of questions to ask, how to get to know them better. But my point was that I think, as ridiculous and irritating as these questions seem that you've quoted there, as examples, they can come from a place of just ignorance or just coarseness. And I think if you sort of try to portray the people that they're asking those kind of questions, as aggressive, you're saying these are aggressions, this is hostility, then instantly you're gonna put people off. That's the issue that I have, and I think that rather than kind of building bridges and bearing in mind that humans are far from perfect, all of us are far from perfect, but by and large, people are kind of open to things. They want to make connections, they want to understand stuff, or at least be a little bit educated, or but is it really the right way to go about it, to be kind of broadcasting these sort of let's say woke kind of terms, microaggressions? It just it just is not going to really connect or even go down particularly well with a lot of people for whom the kind of progressive bubble that we live in is not part of their world. That they'll just be seems to be an accusation of hostility and negative intent in the terminology that's been used, and I would say that's divisive.
Okay, Igor, do you think that microaggressions is a divisive and not a constructive terminology? Do you think it's causing problems?
I kind of agree with Matt, yes. I mean, the term itself was coined back in the 1970s in the US, and this weekend I've been trying to think, what else can we call these behaviors? And I just can't think of any other word. But on the other hand, it's been with us for what, 40, 50 years now, this term, and I don't think it's my job to redefine it or change it, or it is what it is, and I don't think we have a better word for it until it comes, until someone thinks of a better term. I also agree with Matt that the woke left has a problem communicating their ideas using three-word slogans, just like anyone else on the left or on the right. So the language could be a bit more precise. But then on the other hand, these three-word slogans are just slogans to get people motivated maybe to think or talk. So I see the microaggression term as something that's been with us for quite a while, and probably is not going to change anytime soon. So let's just, we don't have a better word for it. So, while I agree that the term aggression probably isn't the best one, but I just can't think of anything else.
Could I ask basically both of you, anyone can answer this, do you believe there's a possibility in that when we use the term microaggression, that if we are going to have an issue with that word, that it can sometimes in the conversation talking about the particular microaggression obscure the transgression that's taken place? So if any of one of you wants to answer that whilst I swiftly plug my power supply into my laptop before this conversation dies, that would be great. Go.
Does the use of what was the question again? Does the use of the term obscure the intent behind the use of the term? Is that essentially?
Or does the use of the term obscure the act itself? I think that's how I understand it.
Yeah.
I think it could. It could. I mean, on Facebook, one of the examples I mentioned was, in feminist circles, there's often talk of, all men do X, Y, and Z. Obviously, not all men do it. And when I first, encountered those statements, I was quite annoyed because I don't consider myself as X, Y, and Z. But then, you kind of talk to people and trying to understand why they're using these terms and what it all means. And now I'm kind of accepting that, yeah, okay, it's not perfect. The language isn't precise, but that's one way of talking about things. So that's how I see it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've sort of been through that experience of understanding that these terms can initially be counterproductive, perhaps, I would say. So the question is, how do you raise these issues in a way that is not having that kind of effect? That's a trickier question. I think reducing it down to that terminology, I personally, I do think is counterproductive.
But then, you know, when we talk in person, it's the tone is completely different, and you may not use, you know, these terms at all. This is more kind of almost academic use of terminology, really. Okay, I know it's Facebook, but it's not academic at all. But you know what I mean. It's kind of written words. It's not normal face-to-face communication.
I maybe it's sort of about like people we don't know. You know, maybe it's much easier to sort of tar all these weirdos over there, you know, with a sort of brush of something unpleasant, you know, because they're strangers and we don't know them. I mean, I think you know, the terminology itself, you know, is maybe one issue I have, but I think the other thing, and you know, I do notice this a lot amongst the left, and I should say, by the way, that I'm not some right-wing guy. I mean, I was a big fan of Corbyn. You know, I would say I'm left-wing, like traditional social democracy kind of guy, but I do have issues with the modern left and some of the kind of the directions that it's going in.
You see it as aggressive in a way when someone talks.
I think this is what it is. So it's not, that's the one issue. It's the issue of the aggression thing, but it's also this attribution of negative intent. That's how I would put it, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think the left falls into that trap in a way that happens way too often, to the point of diminishing returns, at least, or counterproductiveness.
Well, we may want to go further into that exploration. If we could just go a few steps back to the answer you gave regarding microaggressions, the terminology, sometimes obscuring the actual aggression. Because at the beginning of this video, I did read out some of the things that are on that meme, and I'm sure Igor can attest, those are just a few. They're not all of them. So if after a while you've been asked those questions for, I don't want to speculate as to how old Igor is, but I'm quite happy to tell everyone that I'm 44 soon, so buy me a present. But like essentially, if you've been getting those for a significant amount of decades, isn't it possible that the idea of seeing a terminology as being the main thing to talk about, doesn't that obscure the actual happening? Shouldn't that happening be given more of an interest and curiosity?
Because it almost looked like you're saying it sort of diminishes the actual seriousness of the problem, perhaps. Sorry, I'm interrupting and interrupting.
Well,
so maybe
this is the thing. I mean,
go straight to Igor instead.
Sorry, this is the thing. I mean, we saw what happened on Igor's post. Like, the conversation wasn't necessarily about the things that are in the meme. It was more about how the left can, well, let's say, can take a certain situation and then seemingly be extremist about how they deal with it. That was your main umbrage. Yeah, Matt?
That's a great summary. Yeah.
So, I mean, my continual exploration would be about the actual aggressions themselves. I mean, you're saying that the word aggression is not fair to tar all those people with, but if they are asking out of an ignorance or naivety, isn't that at the heart of any form of racism?
I mean, again, the intentions might be good. It might be simple curiosity or even a compliment, but as you say, when you hear those things over and over for many decades, they build up slowly, and eventually these actions, let's just call them actions. I don't want to use microaggressions anymore in this conversation. Just these actions, you know, they have negative impact on things like depression, self-confidence, and so on. So I think it's good to shine a light on them in any way you can. Yes, people might be ignorant about it or not aware, but why not learn about these things? Why not, you know, recognize that, yes, I'm doing this certain thing that I might find kind of innocent, but others might find it a bit grating. So why not just learn that this thing exists, you know, just kind of, it is what it is. Let's be aware of it. You know, if you want to carry on doing it, you know, you're free to do it. But if not, you can change your behavior in a small way that will not instantly, you know, kind of annoy other people. And I think it's well documented in academic publications that these actions do more than just annoy the recipients of the actions. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense to me, and I can understand that when you have to deal with it for years and decades on end, it must get irritating, and you may want to understand. You're understandably going to have some anger build up, or maybe not anger, but just irritation or something.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, come on, guys, why can't you just, you know, just get a grip and not be so annoying? So that does make sense, yeah.
And I think we all kind of do it. It's not just to do with race and ethnicity. It can be with gender. It can be with sexual orientation or any other
Absolutely
preferences. Yeah. You know, whether what it is what you wear or how you behave. These things can happen, you know, within a group itself. Doesn't have to be a marginalized group. So I'm just saying, let's be aware of what we do to each other. That's all.
So okay, what I would go on to say from that, like, do you think, you know, I think there's a sort of a diminishing returns aspect to this. You know, I've sort of, we all make mistakes. You know, I've put my foot in it multiple times, and someone said you might want to sort of phrase it like this. Fine, okay. So I learned from that, you know, and I try and do better next time and be more sensitive. But I think probably over the last year, there's been a sort of a rise in sort of perceived, well, probably actual sort of wokeness from various angles, and I sort of see an increasing reaction to that. I think also, you know, that may be a big part of why generally speaking, you know, Labour did not really do too well in the recent elections, and I think that people are seeing it as it's just sort of gone a bit too far. You know, there's progressive and then there's woke, and it's kind of gone into that territory where it's alienating people with just too much focus on this sort of ideology, you know, and losing some other important kind of grounded stuff which would enrich that and allow that to sit within a broader kind of socialist you know, manifesto. And I have to say, to be honest, I will say I'm an example of that, you know, because I think it's fair to say I'm pretty progressive, you know, like I'm sort of quite an alternative guy. I've done God only knows what crazy stuff in London over the years, met people with all alternative cultures and from all over the world, and broadened my horizons in all kinds of ways. And I go out dressed as a woman and do crazy things, and, you know, I've done my bit to sort of push with that. And so, but nevertheless, I find, if I'm really honest, over the last year, it's kind of got a little too much for me with the real hardcore push on the sort of trans ideology side of things. You know, maybe that stuff is all okay. It just needs a little more time to kind of percolate through or something. And it feels to me like perhaps it's being pushed a little too hard, too quickly, and people are sort of getting alienated. And I think that sort of relates to the original point. Just one quick example, John. I don't know if you remember, but do you remember there was that video I did of synthesizers there was kind of good versus evil, and this guy came on with a comment of like suggesting I was racist because I said the evil one was black. Very, very silly stuff, but you know, I think you're sort of pushing hard in one direction and reacting in the other. You know, that's my concern, and I do think that if I'm in that sort of position, and I consider myself relatively progressive, I would say, I think it's fair to say, and I'm sort of getting a little irritated with constantly seeing all this kind of hyper politicized focus on these particular ideologies rather than a broader focus.
I'd say there's four main things that I'll like to touch upon, because you brought in a lot of stuff into the discussion.
Yeah, sorry, it was a bit of a rant. More of a ramble. Yeah.
I feel like we were going to like basically have a couple sandwiches by like, you know, a nice little monument of progression, but now there's a whole banquet of shit to get through. But there's four things that I came up with in that whole thing there. One would be trust. When you're talking to someone and you don't necessarily know them, then there might be, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but there might be more of a cause to not necessarily let your guard down, let alone, you know, play fair. Yeah. So the whole second issue now, the internet, bad faith and good faith arguments being what they are, can totally mangle someone's viewpoint, the way it's received, the way that viewpoint is acted upon in that way. The third thing I think will be education. Like, we're all playing catch up now. Like 1 year and a bit's worth of education and critical theory on various different topics of sexism, racism, whatnot, isn't going to be, you know, enough to see you through some of the odd situations you'll meet, not just online, but offline, and how to basically do something about it and call it out. I'd say another aspect of it, and you guys probably, you know, probably thought about this quite a lot, is that when we are talking about these things face to face or even via Zoom, say call or whatever, there's a certain amount of ability, I think, to be cognizant about what the other person's saying, and to have a certain amount of well, just belief that they're not going to try and fuck you over. But like, if you're on social media, even if you want to say something that's quite complicated and you've got like a really good, like, say, spin on it or whatever, there's a point system. Yeah, like in the original meme that was posted by Igor, I was trying not to fall into that trap of liking certain points by pressing the button that lets you do so, because that changes how people interact, I think, you know. So that's like a significant thing you don't get in real life. I mean, what do you guys think about all that before I move on to my final thing?
There was a lot to take in there, wasn't there?
Well, Igor, whilst Matt is taking this in, processing all this stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the internet and social media do tend to make it all impersonal and amplify your views. I suppose you kind of have to be the loudest to be heard, and that's maybe not the healthiest thing.
It's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we shouldn't consider online communication as it should be a different form of communication. Basically, it's not the same as talking in person. It's almost like a written word to me. Sometimes with pictures in memes and all that, but it is publicizing as if, you know, it's almost like printing a pamphlet and sending it out, whether it's a joke or whether it's something political or whatever. It's a different form of communication, and we need to be aware of that. I don't think I'm very extreme when I communicate online at all. I mean, I usually post jokes 99% of the time. Sometimes some political things that kind of speak to me, but I don't think you know, this online way of communicating is going to go away. We just need to adapt and understand that it's different from speaking face to face. And if someone is being extreme, they probably will not be extreme in person. It's just, you're almost forced to be extreme, you know, just to be heard. And to get reaction out of people, I suppose.
Well, that's how Twitter works, isn't it? I mean,
Exactly.
we've talked about Facebook quite a lot, but it kind of wants you to be either nay or yay. But either way, both sides have to have some kind of cyber pitchfork to really get things going, because otherwise your posts just don't really like gain traction. But like the final thing that I wanted to say in regards to all this is that, and it kind of takes us back to the beginning, language. Like if you went back, like say a few years ago, and you used the word woke, it would mean one thing to quite a lot of people. Now it's become a bit like the social justice warrior. It's become kind of derisory. I think ultimately the idea of being a social justice warrior is actually something to be quite aspirational towards. But because of the way it's been, I think, mishandled by some people who, because of the anonymity of a keyboard, will just basically do a bit of a rage, that in itself as a term is easy to use, like say, well, like the snowflake of from the Fight Club lineage. So essentially, I think language now is such a strange thing that you might be saying the word woke or social justice warrior or whatever. Even the idea of saying the left, that has so much baggage in it, let alone the fact that you will be interacting with someone who doesn't share your idea of what that language is through the exosuit, as I call it, of the internet. So that's part of the reason why I thought having this conversation on Rantbox TV was better than contributing to what was going to be a very long comments thread of piling in on Matt and saying, you dirty racist, and Matt saying, I'm not racist, I just don't agree. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, any thoughts on that before we start wrapping up?
Well, I'm quite fascinated by language and how it changes, how quickly it changes. You know, as you said, a word meant something else a year ago, now it means something completely different. And I find that really interesting and quite exciting. But the trouble is, we don't always agree on the meaning of a word, so that's a bit tricky. But to me, that's all good. Language should change and evolve, and yeah, that's my take.
Sure, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true. I mean, this ground has been covered many times, but we all still keep falling into the trap, don't we? I know I do. You know, of social media weirdly being almost the worst of all worlds in terms of communication, because you can just write a load of stuff and you're fairly anonymous. There's no body language, there's no facial expressions, there's no tone of voice, and it's really, I'd say, quite an inhuman form of communication, actually. And I've found on Facebook, just in, let's not go into the details, but in certain ways I've kind of deviated from the standard left way of looking at things in certain areas over the last years, and my God, has that been pretty brutal. And I've actually got to the point where I just don't really write anything on Facebook anymore, because people just pile in, and I'm accused of all kinds of horrible stuff, which is largely inaccurate. I'm certainly not a perfect human being, but I don't think I'm a granny killer or whatever it might be. So
please don't be a granny killer. That seriously disrupts our friendship, let alone what I may have to do when I'm actually finished. I'm gonna have to make a fucking phone call. Grannies need to die the way that they were supposed to die, which is through old age and not through any kind of mischievous elements from you. But no, dark humor aside, when it comes to, just to wrap up, the idea of microaggressions, I don't really focus on the aggressions part, and I would hope that when I say microaggression, people are hearing the entirety of it, because to be honest, even if there is a better terminology that has yet to be thought of, if I'm using the word microaggression offline to people in a conversation, it's going to probably be something that they understand. The way we've been talking about it now has been quite nuanced and understandable. If it's online, as you were rightly pointing out, like Matt, I don't necessarily like having these conversations in comments anymore. I try every now and again, and I realize that no, it's kind of like Jaws, man. If you jump in the ocean, it's gonna fucking get you. You can't escape that shit. Hence Rantbox TV and other little things that I do to alleviate a certain kind of social tension. So will I stop using the word microaggression? Probably not. But then again, I definitely won't be having conversations about it online without a certain kind of awareness. I may have to actually skirt around using the word if I know the person talking to me may not necessarily understand it, or for want of a better way of saying it, fixate on that terminology rather than what has been said about me or whoever. So that's my take on it, I suppose, for now.
Yeah, I think there's just a thought I wanted to just throw in, which is actually picking up on something Igor said earlier, which is actually, did Igor say it or did you say it, John? I can't remember actually, but somebody said, does it even need to be defined? That's I think it seems important to you guys, and I get that, you know, but I just can't help wondering if, you know, perhaps it's something that arises from social media again. I don't know, but I think if you kind of go outside the progressive bubble and they hear you talking about these kind of terms, they're like, you know, what the hell are these guys on about?
Well, maybe you need to.
It's about breaking out and sort of conveying and connecting without the alienating terms, which I suppose brings us back to what I was saying before. But sorry, John, I interrupted you.
That's okay. I don't think I said that. Igor, that was you, yes? Talking about a definition.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember myself.
I think it was actually, yeah.
Well, hey, we'll watch the video back.
Yeah.
And we'll know. But I think that there seems to be, and this could be a bigger subject for another time, but it seems to be this idea that you can use language to cause division, whereas I think the bigger problem is that the division's already there. We're just finding a hard time of processing the fact that we haven't really given them a certain kind of platform until not too recently. And the idea of these divisions and terminologies and whatnot spewing out into the wider world, that's kind of, it's already there as far as I can see. I think the trick is to be responsible about that knowledge and not to use it as some kind of narcissistic proxy or tool to be weaponized against other people. So yeah, those are my 2 pennies worth.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Even this term we are covering today, microaggression, can be misused and has been abused in the past. Just like any expression, any term. I mean, as you say, you have to be aware of what you're doing with it. But on the other hand, I think as a result of this conversation here and online on Facebook, I think I will use the term in person, actually, with people, and pointed out when I see it happening, whether it's towards me or someone else. I think it might be a bit divisive, but ultimately it's knowledge, and we all need to learn. I like learning, and I think, without being preachy, I think it's good for everyone to learn and understand themselves and others. If it hurts in the beginning, well, it's maybe like the vaccine, you know, it hurts when it goes in and then you're fine afterwards. But maybe it's that little bit of medicine that everyone needs to take from time to time, just to kind of reassess what they do and what they think and how they behave.
It's tricky because ultimately the action that they've committed themselves to, the words they've chosen, are the dividing elements, if anything, or at least the element that shows that they see a division. So giving that action a wording or terminology, that being the problem, I'm not so convinced. But Matt, I will leave you with the final words before I ask you about your various projects.
Yeah, it's that point, isn't it? It's like you're seeing division there and then giving it a name, but is the risk that by naming it, you're actually the one creating a different division or adding to the existing division, or just, you know, sort of reacting in a way that perhaps isn't really going to help the sort of the original problem. And I think that's probably more the way I see it nowadays. I think that I do, if I'm honest, I do see the modern left in the intention of trying to reduce division, I think there's a real risk that it's actually being increased. In fact, I do see that. I have quite a different curated set of people I follow on Twitter to try and get some very different sort of perspectives, and that is quite obviously happening. And so maybe it goes back to my original point: there's too much happening too fast, and that's why Labour are not doing very well at the moment, or that kind of thing. I think there's things to think about there, and a lot of care that would need to be exercised ideally. And hey, I don't have the answers to that. It's really very tricky.
Indeed. I mean, it's quite tricky regarding talking about the left because there are so many different voices. At least with the right, it's easy to consolidate. It's easy to consolidate what the right's voice is. But you're a braver person than me to try and figure that out, to be honest. As far as Labour's reason for losing, I guess I should just come out on the channel and say that if you don't necessarily have a particular vision as to where you're going, how can you expect people to follow you? Moving on from Keir Starmergate, what do you do, Matt, when you're not talking to me and Igor on RantboxTV? Who are you? Tell the world.
So, we are Dice People. We do dark electronic music with an industrial sort of edge, and we have had one of our videos directed by John, who was a magnificent director. So that's Multiplicity. Go and check that one out on YouTube. It's a nice intro, referencing The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt, a classic cult novel that should be read by everyone because it gives lots of perspective in all sorts of crazy ways. So yeah, I think I'm just going to say that. That's what I say.
Fair enough. I read The Dice Man in preparation for doing that video shoot. And
you did?
I think reading it again with my current mindset might be interesting, because even at the time I thought, Jesus, this guy is like running to cancellation hell. But that being said, let's find out swiftly how Igor's doing. Igor, what do you do when you're not talking to myself and Matt from Dice People?
I'm also a musician, and that's how Matt and I met. We a few years ago we did a gig together on Brick Lane,
I sought you out, didn't I? Because we were looking for kind of other bands that had a bit of audio-visual element.
Yeah.
You guys were really cool and did a great show.
So yeah, that's how we met. A band Auto Rotation, which is kind of electronic, a bit of industrial and glitch and all of that. I also am in a kind of post-punk band called Tantrum Centrum. Started in lockdown last summer, and we are having our first gig in June, so that's exciting.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
cool.
That's it.
That sounds awesome. By all means, your links are in the description box of this video, so people can check them out if they want. I just want to say thank you. You guys have been really cool. I knew it was going to be civil. I knew it wasn't really going to kick off, but you never know. You never know. Yeah, you're tighten your sphincter through these kind of conversations. But thankfully, I can relax my anus now.
I think that's just briefly just throwing this in. That's one of the every cloud has a silver lining, right? And I think I've been battling on social media, as I sort of hinted at earlier on, and I think it has helped me to get a thicker skin, I will say, because I've had to learn to deal with all kinds of shit coming at me, and that's the positive side. So I think, in a weird sort of way, I think maybe that's why I had quite a calm conversation, because I've learned to just not really take stuff personally so much and just listen to what people are saying and give stuff back and be confident in what I'm saying. And so I think that might be one positive of the generally awful nature of social media. So just throwing that out there. Yeah.
Okay.
We definitely need more of this civil, polite conversation.
Yeah. Let's all go down the pub and talk over a pint. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody else watching this, if you enjoyed it, give us a like, subscribe. There will be more videos, as you've probably seen if you're a regular viewer. Every Friday, there is a video up before 12:30 p.m. GMT. This was RantboxTV. I was your host, John Clay. Have a wonderful day, evening, night, or, well, whenever. You could be watching this in the early hours. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.